Hello and welcome to the last installment of this deep dive into the W item glitch. We won't be going over too much new ground in this edition. We've covered every version of the glitch already. This last episode is mostly just a reduction of what we learned in the first 3 parts. There's much more additional information in those previous episodes. If you struggle to follow any of this, those videos should help to clear up any confusion. Today, we're going to run through each of the techniques in brief. So thank you for joining me this last time as we embark on the final episode, the Compendium of the Ultimate Guide to the W item glitch. The first 3 versions of the glitch are easier to perform with your ATB mode set to 8. This will stop your enemies from attacking you or escaping while you select items and magic. The basic method is very easy to perform. Simply select W item and pick any usable. Select any ally or an enemy to use it on. Then select a second item, but do not use it. Instead, press Cancel just once. Select the same item again, but cancel again. For each time you do this, the original item will be duplicated. You can continue this until you have 99 copies of the first item you selected. Just be a bit careful not to press Select or Cancel twice in a row. The basic version is very forgiving though, so as long as you don't accidentally use up the last copy of an item in your inventory, you can just try again if you make a mistake. The drawback of this method is that you can only duplicate items that you can use in battle. The more complex versions need to be used to duplicate weapons, armor and accessories. The next technique is the steal method. This is a bit trickier. For this you will need a dummy item. This can be any item that you can use in battle. I usually use a green for this item because they're easily replenished with a quick visit to the Chocobo Ranch. You must only own 1 copy of the dummy item and no more. You must customize your inventory and place this item in the top slot. You should also put any item in the second slot that you can use in battle. Normally I use a curative, like an elixir or a mega elixir. You will have to repeat this process, or at least one very similar to it, each time you want to duplicate items using the more complex versions. Just be warned, don't use an extremely rare item for either your usable or your dummy item. Finally, you need to get rid of every instance of the item you are trying to duplicate. In this example, we're duplicating carrot nuts. So, we sell off every carrot nut we own. As for materia, we just need a copy of W item equipped to one character and steel equipped to another. Equip some curative magic too. Oh, and don't equip any materia that triggers a counter-attack when executing any of the following techniques, unless you are specifically instructed to do so. Alright, let's get into a battle and see how this works. Now that you are in a fight, either wait for your opponent to perform an attack or cast some curative magic. While the animation of that move is progressing, quickly input the following commands. Select steel, then select W item. Select the dummy item from the top slot and use it. Scroll down to the second slot and wait for a moment. If the steal is achieved and you've set up your inventory correctly, the stolen item will replace your dummy item. Now select the usable, but rather than using it, press cancel once. Select it again and cancel again. You should see the stolen item has duplicated in the top slot. Now, continue to select and cancel the usable. Keep on going until 99 copies of the stolen item have been duplicated. After that, just kill the enemy or escape. The main uses for this technique are to obtain 99 copies of the items currently listed on the screen. In episode 1, you'll find more in-depth information about this list. The morph technique is very similar. This time, we need to weaken the enemy first though. Usually Demi 3 is the best way to weaken enemies, but there are other methods, like Elf or Suicide, Laser and Coin, that you can use as substitutes, or when an enemy is immune to gravity magic. This technique only works when fighting multiple creatures, because at least one opponent must remain on the battlefield to continue the W item glitch. It's normally used for farming sources. It's highly recommended that you place Yuffie in your party to execute this method. Equip her with her ultimate weapon, the Conformer. This weapon is the only one in the game that morphs enemies with full attack power. When setting up your materia, place Morph on Yuffie. Put Demi 3 or a substitute on at least one other character. More, if possible. Then put W item on at least one other character, apart from Yuffie. Organize your inventory in the exact same way as we set up for the steal method. Dummy item in the top slot, any usable item in the second slot, and make sure we have no copies of the item we're trying to duplicate. Then get into a battle. Cast Demi enough times to weaken the enemy to the point that a single hit of Morph will kill them. Either wait for an enemy attack, or cast a non-lethal spell. Then perform the following actions before the animation of this move is complete. Have Yuffie use Morph. Quickly select W item, select the dummy item and use it. Then scroll down to the usable and wait for a few moments. When the morphed item is returned to the top slot of your inventory, begin selecting and cancelling the usable. You should see the morphed item duplicating in the top slot. Just like the steal method, this technique will not work if you already have any copies of the morphed item in your inventory. And just like all the other methods, you can't own more than one copy of the dummy item either. As mentioned earlier, this method is good for farming for sources and maxing out most character statistics. But it only works if you are fighting against multiple enemies. As such, we need to use a far more sophisticated method to grind for mine sources and magic sources, because the only way to attain these is by morphing monsters called serpents and unknown trees in the sunk Angelica plane. These creatures only appear on their own. So now we move on to the advanced morph technique, which will allow us to do this. The advanced morph glitch has a really tricky setup. It's important to learn it though, because it's by far the best way to duplicate magic and mine sources. You can also use variants of this technique to duplicate some difficult to acquire items, ribbons, tetra elementals and guidebooks. Those variants are explained in detail in episode 2 of this series. Before you attempt this glitch, be sure to get copies of all the items displayed here. Make sure you have, at the very least, the minimum number of copies of equipment and materia pieces listed and leveled up to the minimum level. I firmly advise that you don't try this with anything less than what's listed in the recommended columns though. The grind gets easier and easier as you level up and acquire new copies of materia. For the smoothest experience possible, refine your technique and aim for the quantities and levels listed in the premium column. Once you are all kitted out, you can begin the setup. Firstly, set your ATB to active or recommended. Next, equip Yuffie with the Conformer and give her this set of materia. The order of the materia is very important, so follow this diagram exactly. Give the other party members instances of W item, Elf or Suicide, high-level gravity magic, and perhaps an additional copy of Revive, if you have it. As usual, set up your inventory with a dummy item in the top slot and a usable in the second slot. Make sure you don't have any of the items that you are trying to morph in your inventory. As this technique is predominantly used in the Jellica, you should equip protections against status effects, especially confused status. Now enter a battle and use Demi to sufficiently weaken your enemy. If an enemy is immune to Demi, try using L for suicide or coin instead. After that, simply select W item, select the dummy item, cut it, scroll down to the usable and wait. Eventually Yuffie will be attacked, and provided the attack is powerful enough to kill her, she will respond with a series of counter-attacks. Her first instance of final attack will morph the enemy, and then she will proceed to cast Revive 4 times in a row. This chain of animations will extend the battle long enough to duplicate dozens of sources. As soon as you see the morphed item has returned to your inventory, rapidly start selecting and cancelling the usable item. As you will have come to expect by now, you'll see the morphed item is duplicating in the top slot. You have to duplicate the item quickly though, because you only have a limited amount of time until the battle is over. As you can see, this method is incredibly powerful, as it allows you to duplicate any source in the game and max out your player stats in no time. Next up, we have the throw method. With the exception of Tifa's and Red 13's equipment, this method can be used to duplicate almost any weapon. Obviously this is good for completionists, but several weapons can also be sold for huge quantities of gil, so this is a great way to get rich quick. Just be careful not to sell off your final copy of any rare equipment. The inventory setup is a touch different to the other techniques. As always, we need a dummy item in the top slot and a usable in the second slot. But now we need just one single copy of the weapon you wish to replicate in the third slot too. As for Materia, we want one character equipped with Comma to contain, a second character equipped with HP/MP swap, and throw materia as well. This throw materia is best to be at level 1, so pick up a fresh copy from Fort Condor if you need to. Equip your third character with W item. Finally, we need to set our ATB to active or recommended. We need to find an enemy called a sea worm, which can be found on the beaches near the cave, that contains quadra magic. Firstly, we select our attack magic and aim it at the character with throw materia, but we don't cast it yet. Instead, wait for the sea worm to attack with a move called Sunstorm. As soon as this animation begins, quickly input the following commands. Cast the magic. Select throw. Select the weapon. Throw it. Select W item. Select the dummy item. Use it. Scroll down to the usable and wait. When the sea worm's animation has completed, your magic will be cast. This should kill the character that's selected to throw. Because that character was downed without getting a chance to execute the throw, the weapon will return to the top slot of our inventory. Once this happens, you can continue the W item glitch. Repeatedly select and cancel the usable. You will now see the weapon being duplicated in the top slot. An item, called Dragon Scales, can be stolen or morphed from the sea worm. This item can be used as a dummy item. So unlike other methods, I recommend Dragon Scales instead of greens in this instance, as this is a very convenient way to replenish your dummy item each battle. While the throw method is great for duplicating weapons, the grind will still take some time. Wherever possible, I recommend that you simply buy 99 copies if you are chasing a perfect save file. On screen now is a list of all the weapons to focus on when duplicating weapons using the throw technique. The final method is the reverse steal technique. This is the most powerful of the W item glitches, as it can be used to duplicate almost everything in the game. The drawback is, you have very limited control over which item gets duplicated. The basic setup for this method is quite straightforward. You'll need to equip enemy skills with the Frog Song ability to each of your characters. You'll want high-level attack magic equipped to each character too. Then, we need some copies of Asuna. Don't pair any of this magic with all materia. After that, you just need W item equipped to any character. You may also want to get some stock magic equipped. Set up your inventory in the typical fashion and set your ATB to active or recommended. Just a note, this method will only duplicate items if you have one single copy in your inventory. So, if you have more than one instance of an item that you want to duplicate, sell off any additional copies you might own. The enemies we need to look for are called vices. You'll find them in the Sector 5 slums. Once you've encountered a pair of them, begin by casting Frog Song on one opponent. Now we just have to wait for the second opponent to steal. Pay attention to which item it robs from you. If it's something you want to replicate, continue the glitch. Start by casting magic on the vice that mugged you. Before the magic animation has finished, select W item, select the dummy item. Use it. Then scroll down to your usable item and wait. When the vice is killed, whatever item was stolen will be returned to your inventory. Provided you only owned one copy, it will be returned to the top slot. Now, of course, we can start selecting and cancelling the usable. This will duplicate the returned item. If the vice steals an item that we don't care to duplicate, we can just kill them both and try again. But as long as it's not the dummy item that gets stolen, we have a second chance. So if this happens, cast Frog Song on the second opponent and wake up the first by casting Asuna. Now we can continue the strategy as normal, but concentrating on the first opponent instead. Be a bit careful though. If the second vice awakens, it's very likely that he'll immediately flee the battle. If he makes off with something valuable, you may lose that item forever. If you get the feeling that the active opponent is taking too long to steal, you can double down on the sleeping vice by casting Stop. The more items you have in your inventory, the lower the odds are of a vice stealing an item that you want to duplicate. So in preparation for this glitch, you will want to purge from it as many items as you can. It's important to be careful when you are doing this though, because there are quite a few items that you won't get another opportunity to obtain. The items at the top of this list can't be duplicated with any technique apart from the reverse steal method. The items in the center are all prizes won from games at Gold Saucer, but it takes an unreasonable amount of effort to grind for them manually, so it's strongly advised that you duplicate them with the reverse steal method as well. At the bottom left are items that can also be gained through hard grinding early in the game, but if you miss your chance, the reverse steal method is now the only way to gain more copies of them. Personally, I would recommend duplicating these with the reverse steal technique anyway. At the bottom right are items that could be more easily duplicated using the regular steal method during the raid on Midgar and your encounters with Ultimate Weapon. But if you miss your chance back then, the reverse steal technique is now the only way to replicate them. Altogether, these 39 items make up the focal point of the reverse steal grind. Unless you've already replicated these items one way or another, ensure you have just one copy of each of them in your inventory before you begin. Also, double check that you've not left anything listed here equipped to one of your characters by mistake. Once all of these items have been successfully replicated, you can consider the reverse steal grind complete. The items on this next list are all easier to duplicate using the throw method. But if you want a perfect game, you cannot purge any of them from your inventory. You can equip them to your characters though, and by doing that, remove 6 of them from the equation. This will increase your odds slightly. I recommend that you start with the reverse steal grind and move on to grinding for the weapons listed under the throw method later. If the opportunity arises to duplicate them with the reverse steal method, take it. This will save you time in the long run and make the reverse steal grind feel more productive. There's a handful of missable items that are easily duplicated with the basic method. I advise that you do this at the first possible opportunity. Whatever you do, just don't purge them from your inventory. We also have a few items that can't be duplicated. These can't be sold and have no effect on the glitch. They're worth mentioning because a perfect game is not complete until you have 99 copies of each of them. You can only get multiple copies of them through hard grinding. The items won at Gold Saucer are particularly frustrating to grind for, but it can be done. Finally, we have the save crystal and the battery. Like most of the limit break items, once you use them, you never see them again. If you want a perfect save file, just make sure you retain one copy of each. Provided you've played through every other section of the game and not missed, used, sold, or lost anything, you should have at least one copy of all the items listed here. If you see an item anywhere on this list, it is not safe to remove it completely. You will never get new copies if you do. One final note before we move on. Be very careful with some of these. There's some really sneaky items, and it tends to be the most unassuming ones that catch the veteran players out. Good players can typically remember where things like the missing score, the behemoth horn, Vagarith claws and earth mallets are found. The rareness of those items make them infamous. It actually tends to be things like iron bangles, bronze bangles, graviballs, shotguns and the 4-point shuriken that really experienced players find they're missing at this stage. It's not because those items are at all hard to find, it's because people sell them, thinking they can easily acquire more copies late in the game. Always refer to this list before you think to use or sell anything that you are not 100% sure about. This tutorial series wouldn't feel complete if I didn't mention some key items. The Wall Market cross-dressing mini-game has a number of bits that can be permanently missed. The key items you attain vary depending on how you play the section. Typically, players consider the best items to be those that will have Don Corneo pick Cloud during the infiltration of his mansion. The blonde wig, the silk dress, the diamond tiara, the sexy cologne, and the lingerie or the bikini briefs. The 3 coupons won in the vent-crawling mini-game on level 63 of the Shinra building should also be retained for a perfect game. do not exchange them for the items at the computer. There's also a very remote possibility that you'll activate a bug when obtaining the snowboard. When the boy at Icicle Lane gives you it, just be sure to close any dialog boxes before leaving the house. If you don't, the snowboard may not be added to your key items list. Thankfully, this bug has been fixed in recent editions of the game, so for most of you, this is nothing to worry about. Those few small notes conclude this compilation. Before we gently fade out, I'd like to thank the small but wonderful community that have supported these videos. Pre D, Martin McCarthy, Bisheki, Red Mario, Atli Flammer, Chorizo Bear, Soldier First Class, and of course, the legend that is Fuzzfinger Gaming. Thanks to all of my new subscribers too. I hope this series lived up to the promise of being the ultimate guide to the W item glitch. The future of this channel is uncertain, but there's still more Final Fantasy VII content that I want to produce. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? For now, please help to share this compilation with other enthusiasts of the game. The goal was always to create a resource for the broader community. Without your help, it will simply be lost and forgotten. For now, this is the end. Of course, there's more information in the description. You can also view the previous episodes for more in-depth information. Goodbye, and good luck too.